Hi folks, in this video I'm going to be talking about the French R, which is definitely the sound most, or at least many French learners struggle the most with. So first of all I want to say there are two main misconceptions about the French R which unfortunately are being spread all over the internet by people who want to give explanations about the French R but don't necessarily know much about phonetics or linguistics, which is alright, but when it comes to phonetics I think it's important to be as accurate as possible. But anyway, so the first misconception is that the French R is pronounced in the throat, right there.
It's a sound made in the throat.
Ici, here.
That, my friends, is where the French is being...
So it's pronounced down here.
That's completely false, okay? So if you want to hear a sound that is produced in the throat, here it is, okay? That's a sound produced in the throat. So it hasn't got anything to do with the French R, as you can hear. So the French R is actually produced at the back of your mouth, okay? That's the actual location of this sound. And to be more accurate and use the scientific terms, it's produced basically bringing the back of your tongue closer to the uvula, okay? And an image is appearing on the screen for those of you who are unfamiliar with these terms. Right, the second thing now is that there is actually one French R. Actually, there isn't one French R, but several French Rs. So there's one R, R phoneme and different allophones of this same phoneme, for those who are familiar with linguistics. So basically a phoneme is a sound, and an allophone is just this sound being produced in different ways, sometimes depending on the speaker, on where he comes from, and sometimes depending on the context, like on the word itself, whether it's next to a vowel or a consonant or a specific phoneme. But anyway, doesn't matter if you don't really know what a phoneme or an allophone is, but what you have to know is that there are different ways of producing the French R. Okay, it's not one sound but several. The first thing you have to know is that nowadays the default pronunciation of the R sound in standard French is a voiced uvula fricative. So what that means is that as I said, you're bringing the back of your tongue closer to the uvula, and the air flows in between the uvula and the back of your mouth. So the what did I say? No, in between the uvula and the back of your tongue. The uvula is the back of your mouth. Anyway, so the air flows in between, and that creates a friction, hence the name fricative. Okay, so but let me demonstrate. Ra, ra, ra. Okay, so that's basically a voiced uvula fricative. Ra. Now, when this sound is right next to a voiceless consonant, what happens is a very common phenomenon called assimilation. And so what happens is that this voiced consonant is going to become a voiceless consonant because it's next to another voiceless consonant. So it's going to become ch, r, ch. Okay, that's a very common phenomenon. It's actually the same thing that happens in a word like disgusting. So the default pronunciation, let's say, assuming that there's any kind of default pronunciation in English. Anyway, so the G letter is normally pronounced G, but since there's a S sound right before it, so a voiceless sound S, people naturally tend to transform the G into a K, because it's quite difficult to pronounce a voiceless sound and right after it a voiced sound, right? So it's easier to say disgusting than disgusting, So the same thing happens with the French R. R becomes R when it's next to a voiceless consonant. Okay, let me give you concrete examples. I hope you're still following me until now. So let's take a word like rouge. Rouge. Okay, so the first sound that you hear at the beginning, the R sound, R, is a voiced uvular fricative. Okay, rouge, rouge. Now let's take a word like partir, which means to leave. Partir. So let me pronounce it slowly. Partir. Okay? So in this case, the R sound that's in the middle is right before a voiceless consonant, T. So because of that, there's this phenomenon called assimilation, and the originally voiced sound, R, is going to become voiceless, R. Partir. Okay? Now let me give you an example with both allophones of this phoneme in the same word. Okay? My own first name, which is Frédéric. Yes, my first name is not Fred. Okay, that's just the way people call me. But my name on my identity card, of course, is Frédéric. Okay, so Frédéric. The first R sound, which is right after a voiceless consonant, so F, is going to be H. Okay, Fr, Fré. And then the second R sound, which is right before a vowel, well, in between two vowels, Frédéric, Frédéric, Eric, is going to be voiced. So you've got a voiceless uvular fricative, and then a voiced uvular fricative. Frédéric, 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 Frédéric. Okay? I hope you're following me until now, because I'm conscious of the fact that I'm using technical terms, but I hope it's clear. Now there's a third way of pronouncing the French R which I absolutely have to talk to you about because it's extremely widespread. It's basically some sort of lazy form of the uvular fricative. So what happens is basically the same thing. You're bringing the tongue closer, the back of the tongue closer to the uvula, except that you're not bringing it close enough so as to produce, so as to generate friction. Okay, so basically what you're doing is just moving the back of your tongue backwards just a little bit, and that should sound like something like this: ra, 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 ra. Okay, so that's we actually call it an approximant because it's kind of in between a consonant and a vowel, so it's a uvular approximant. Ra, 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 ra. Okay. Now let me tell you when you will encounter it. So first of all, at the end of a word. So when the R sound is at the end of a word, like in a verb, like partir, partir. So you've just heard it. Partir, at the end of the word. Finir, I don't know. Anyway, so when the R is basically at the end of the word. You could also, use a fricative in this case and say something like partir, partir, but many people will prefer to use an approximant, partir, And the second case in which you will hear, a uvular approximant is basically, well, certain speakers basically tend to use this approximant, this uvular approximant kind of everywhere, and that's basically typical from Paris. Many people in Paris, speak like that. Et voilà, alors nous, on a un ami, on est très content pour lui parce qu'il va bientôt partir dans le nord de la France et on espère que ça va très bien se passer pour lui, hein, pour lui. So I hope you could hear the approximant. So that's typical from Paris and from France in general. Quite a few people in France use a lot of approximants a lot more than in Switzerland or Belgium, for example. So I've just given you basically the three main ways of pronouncing the French R, but there are also other ways. One way is also the uvular trill, so it's almost the same as the uvular fricative, except that instead of the air flowing in between the uvula and the back of the tongue, it's rather the uvula vibrating very strongly, and that creates a sound like so it's a stronger vibration. And there's also there are also other ways which are basically completely different, and it's the rolled R, so the alveolar trill, r, like in Spanish or Italian. But that's very, very rare, and you're very unlikely to actually meet a native French speaker who uses that kind of R sound, except if you go, to very well, I don't know, like I think in certain areas in the south, you might find elderly people in the south of France. You might find elderly people who pronounce r. In some parts of Quebec, in Canada, and or other French-speaking parts of Canada, and some rare elderly people in Belgium, in Wallonia, might also produce a r sound. But as I said, it's extremely rare. You should know, however, that if you want to sing opera in French, that's the kind of R sound that you have to use, r. Okay, so you never know, like if you want to become an opera singer in French, you might want to be able to pronounce an alveolar trill as well, ra. Now, I'd like to end this video with a bit of history. You might wonder where this French R comes from. That's a question that many people ask, for example, on language groups, on Facebook and stuff. And very often when, some people ask that on language groups, for example, you will always find people who answer something like, oh, that's probably because French was influenced by Germanic languages, in which this sound is, very common, like German, Dutch, etc. And I have to admit that it's a very, it sounds like a very good hypothesis. But actually, nowadays, most linguists seem to agree on the fact that it's probably the other way around. So basically, it's not Germanic languages influencing French, but rather French influencing Germanic languages on that point. So basically, what would have happened is that before the 17th century, the alveolar trill, so basically r, was the most common way of pronouncing the R sound, okay, everywhere in Europe. But suddenly, in the 17th century, the upper class in Paris started pronouncing it as, a uvular trill or a uvular fricative, anyway, a uvular sound, okay? And so quickly, this sound came to be associated with the upper class, so, it was seen as a prestigious sound, so it quickly got spread through France, okay? And since France at the time was a very influent country, and since French was also a very influent language, it was a lingua franca for, quite a long time, well, it also got spread to other countries, okay? And, people in other countries started using that kind of sound in their own native language. I know that might sound a bit strange, but you have to realize that at the time, French was a very prestigious language, and it was also lingua franca. So what might have happened, I haven't read that anywhere, so I'm just supposing, so it might be completely wrong, but I guess that what might have happened is that, you probably know that in many, upper class families at the time, it was very common to speak French to your children, for example. So if the parents were using that kind of pronunciation in French and talking in French to their children, and since French was sometimes viewed as much more prestigious than their mother tongue, for example, if they spoke, Danish, well, what happens is that the children might have started pronouncing, using this French R in their own, native tongue as well, and then people from the same country heard them use it as well, and then that's how it got spread, in different countries. So that would be the explanation. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you understood everything. I hope it wasn't too technical or too unclear or whatever. You can ask me any questions in the comments. If you have suggestions for other videos, feel free to comment, and I'm probably going to take into consideration. And feel free to share this video to your friends who are struggling to produce the French R. I'm not giving you any tricks like, there's this very common trick like put a pen in your mouth and try to like this, or pretend that you're a cat and do like but we all know that these tricks don't work, so I just explain to you exactly, precisely how we produce it, as accurately as possible, without making it overly complicated. And now it's just your job to try and listen carefully and try by yourself, and I'm sure you will finally get there after years of practice, maybe hundreds of years or thousands of years. You might actually die before you can produce the French R, but anyway, I wish you good luck. Just kidding. Good luck.